Okay, as you can see, the title of my presentation is a little bit different to what was mentioned. So first, I want to start thanking to the organizers of this event because they have insisted on the opening with these spaces because I think are fundamental so that EFM could be consolidated in the region through experiences and knowledge shared among all of us who are going through on a day-to-day basis. So I want to thank you for having invited me to participate in this event today. And what I would like to talk about is about the art of managing corporate spaces. And when I talk about management of corporate spaces, the concept that I'm using is pretty wide. So, and it goes from design of such spaces, of how we conceive those spaces. We're going to start working on a plan on what we want to put there, where and how do we want to have that environment which a company needs. So even to the implementation of strategies such as flexible work, we all know they are all taking a rise these days. So this is the broader concept I'm going to be mentioning in this presentation. The reason for which I decided to talk about this, I have two main reasons. The first one is that the management issue has become a repeating issue on a day-to-day basis. So my company is always asking me to think what are we going to do with the new space that we're going to get in a given place? What are we going to do to optimize the space that we already have in another place? Because we're going to have a new team and we need to install them here, arrange them here in the same space. So I think that it was interesting to tell you a little bit about those experiences that I have had with regards to this issue. And the second reason is because I think if it's repeatedly, for me, it does not happen only to me, but it's something that is happening to many of us who are in this area. I see that as an opportunity, very big opportunity, so that as professionals, we could consolidate ourselves, playing a strategic role in the company, not just being seen as mentioned before as that person who we ask just for the things when they are not working properly, but when we are seen as a key player who is in charge of making relevant decisions for the company. And when I think of the relevance that the topic has taken is because every time, increasingly, when we check articles related to FM, or we participate in discussion groups in the media and social networks, we start reading a lot about the reasons why the space today is so important for a company, and what is done there, why is it important. So then we start seeing concepts like people are more productive if you give them space with the conditions that that person requires. So then we start having a responsibility on our hands. They throw it on our laps. Because the labor force depends on us somehow. So there are some people who are going one step ahead. They don't not only they talk about commitment, but also about productivity. But the commitment that the employee acquires the company. So how doing everything is related with the environment at work and the physical structure to which that employee is exposed to. In the same way, we're seeing a lot about a factor on how to retain my employees, because they decide this is a very good space in which I'm working in. So I'm not leaving if I have this, I have that, I don't get this anywhere else. So the same when they want to train, to recruit people. This is a very important point, and the best thing is that there is data out there which they consider that. They're not generalized things, and it's not something that is happening in the majority on a day-to-day basis, but it's starting to take place, and that's why we need to start considering them. We are also told that be careful because you're responsible for the space and you have to consider, you have to accommodate different generations in the same space. So tell me, you have to work in team with them. So with the space that you create, you could achieve harmony among those different generations they have, that the company has. And finally, we start reading a lot about how the issues that companies try to make their employees have a balance on what's their labor work and the well-being and quality of life. We could be implementing with the flexible work modalities, or when we see reasons like this, and we read in some research and surveys that we are having with regards to this aspect, as a facility manager, I can make a difference. If I start positioning myself, definitely, I can make changes, and I could start contributing so that the company may reach its objective, providing a space that's appropriate for people who work for us. So, in the light of that, I think it is definitely important to consider the role we assume when we start understanding in terms of what we can do to achieve those transformations in those spaces. So, we have a moment here. We need to start understanding the tendencies. What are we talking about? What is it we can do? What are the tools that we have as facility managers, especially when we have surveys and polls that say that in the States only 11% of people are happy with the workplace in which they perform their activities on a day-to-day basis. So the company checks that number. They say, oh, it's only 11%. What are we going to do? But pay attention, because we need to optimize resources. Because remember that people and infrastructure is what costs the most. So it is good that we have the best space, but we need to optimize resources. So when we face this kind of paradox, it is important to think, what do we have at hand and how do we manage that? In trends or tendencies, I have divided them in two. First one is all the trends oriented to design, where basically are telling us there is a space, open space tendency, where we have reduction of offices to the minimum. The ventilation and lights and illumination, which will allow a more individual control. We also have the diversity in the corporate spaces. We're not talking about meeting rooms, the standard meeting rooms we are used to, but a number of spaces for individual work and corporate work and teamwork, short work, long meetings, and so on. And also, everything that we see in aspects of leisure times, which are pretty innovative and nice. So it makes the employee feel at home. The other tendencies to which I will talk about are the ones that have to do with the flexible work shifts. Here we have things like the flexible shift, teleworking, comprised work, and shared work. And in this, we have all the modifications possible, but we could have a modality which may adjust to a local condition, is the restriction or peak hour time, depending on the traffic restriction that we have. So people would go earlier or later. They would show up for work depending on the traffic restriction they have. So with this, we have some concepts. We have concepts like the non-assigned desks. So we have offices from first level, not assigned, where people could work if they needed, or in order to have a meeting with a client or customer, to work in silence and not in a noisy space, open space, which would generate a lot of distraction, or anything dealing with work based on the activity. If your job is this way, so you are not going to be allocated that, but this. So you have these resources available, not the other. So you will start modifying that. And as I mentioned before, in this point, definitely, there are many tools many tendencies, how I land them down to my company, how I take them to ground. Prior to continue, I want to propose an exercise. Let's think about the famous concept, which is the open spaces concept, which is one of the tendencies, which is taking a big influence. Now, here we have some pictures. On the left-hand side, you see an open space office, but if you see the picture on the right, which is the picture from the 20s, I don't see much difference in terms of open space. So here we could ask ourselves, okay, what's going on? Are we going back? We don't have evolution? What's going on? And what I know basically is that with the issue of space management, the decisions that we make, they need to be very responsible, because very likely there are many companies which look alike, and there are going to be tendencies which would apply for each company in the same way. And as well as for these people in this picture, it worked. We have an open space probably. There are other people for whom these open spaces doesn't simply work. So thinking in terms of responsibility that we have and the challenge of assuming the space management as a tool for our company, so our company can benefit and the people who work in it. So the responsibility as facility managers has to be assumed, really, from that perspective. That's why I want to mention a model of tools which is taking strength to analyze this space issue. And it's a tool for analysis which is called people, tools, and places. So what it tells us is, whenever you're going to take a decision with regards to the space management issues for your people, analyze these three factors. And the intersection that you have in that intersection are going to be that those tools which that model is going to come out that you can adjust and it could be good. So basically, when you talk about people, so you have the corporate DNA. So what people want to project through, what the company wants to project through the objectives, what are the benefits for people, what is the management style for people, and here, for example here, how we're going to implement flexible work in a company where the management of every day they have wanted their employees from 8 to 5. That's not going to work, and we're going to have to go back with measures like that, or change drastically the management, which I don't know which way we would take. When we talk about tools in this case, the focus is very technological, and basically what we are asked to do to evaluate what's the access like, how does connectivity work for people. So that connectivity provides connectivity, or do you need to have a cable, a wired connection? So how safe is it for people to work from outside? Do you have systems which would allow your people to work from outside without affecting the security of the information? Things like mobile extensions. How easy is it to have people taking calls, or that your extension may go directly to the computer? All that kind of things which facilitate mobility with security, that's what this part would refer to. And in the end, the place, the venue where we are responsible for is the physical space we have available for. And what's the space we have to create that space that people need? So this is a tool, analysis tool, which is being considered a lot, is being used a lot. We have all this information handy, so it's not something that is difficult for us to manage. So let's say that this is super important. I consider this important, and providing those tools so that at the moment we make decisions with regards to this, our role will demonstrate a strategy and solid decisions which are conceived for our people, for a company. I'm going to mention here quickly two cases. One company, technology company, for which I have the opportunity to work, they basically devote themselves to running applications to generate a cellular application which facilitate financial transactions. So our clients were banks, supermarkets, any company which could proceed with the transaction through the cell phones. So the situation, we have accelerated growth. So when I got to the company 6 months ago, 6 months before, they had moved to a new building which was built with all the architectural tendencies that I mentioned. They had a pretty beautiful education level, avant-garde. And when I got there, when they moved in, they had approximately 70% of our space occupation. In 6 months, they were reaching 100%. And the management was saying, we need to continue bringing people, so let's solve the issue. And what did they propose? So let's have flexible work modalities. Let's see how we can do people leave to work from home, and we free space, and we generate non-assigned unit spaces, and we manage it that way. With regards to that, we say, okay, allow us to run an evaluation of the situation. And the first thing we did was we had an occupational analysis for a month. We took care, we evaluated in 2 hours a day how we were using workspaces, measuring who was there, not who with name, but if it was busy or not. So this is what generates is like a map of areas that are hot areas and cold areas to measure. In this map, the conclusion of whom of the strongly occupied areas were 1 or 2 teams or equipment, and the area that was typically empty was sales. Most of them did not have agreement. It was incoherent. So we had some of the teams were almost pretty well seating. The teams were seating. There was not a way to clarify properly which was the way to clarify. So we proceeded with interviews with leaders from each team, and what we found were 2 things. First, they told us, my team could get a call in sales, and the person in my team has to run to sit with the designer, and they could work for a long time in that, and that's going to happen today without me realizing it. So those dynamics are present in all the teams, or an emergency. So something happened with an application, so they have to go, run, work in teams. So they told us it's very complicated for you to generate this, because they're going to have to be sitting one next to the other to work and be able to solve the problems. And the other thing that we discovered was that in the end, these leaders wanted to see their people there. They told us, I want you to be here just in case. Some people would mention things like that, and you start to understand, see, the management is not in favor of this, we're going to create conflict here. So the conversation with IT with regards to tools, first, they told us that the licenses with which they were operating in terms of mobility were very few, and due to security issues of information, of course, and information from customers at that moment, they did not have the tools to guarantee that people would work safely from home. So from the standpoint of technology, there was not support to assure that and guarantee that mobility. So when the management had this situation, We said we're sorry, but even though we tried, it's a model that's not going to work. So definitely the solution was to get a new branch where they would move all the support areas, human resources, finance, management, facilities, and leave everyone from the core business in charge of the operational part in the building, growing and occupying these spaces. We have another case in the company I'm working now. The headquarters office for Latin America, it's in Dallas. And here what we see is the contrary. The space we had is completely not properly used, underused. So we had to run an occupational analysis where we realized that the space we had was about 40%. We did not surpass that percentage, which is significantly low. So what we decided was, we said we need to move to a smaller space. And we're going to, due to public policy, corporate policy, for everything that was being done there, they told us, you need to conceive a plan with principles of avant-garde principles where we're going to provide all mobility possible to people, and we're going to revolutionize pretty much what you guys are used to in the Americas. To start with this process, the first thing we did, because we knew that the cultural issue was important, despite we were talking about the United States, we find a lot of limitations and resistance. So what we did was to involve people in everything regarding to creating committees in which we worked, for example, collaborative spaces or open spaces. And we involved people in those committees, telling them a bit about how they were going to design the space, and they would provide us their contributions from the standpoint of the employee, what they thought, what they made of that, what they agree or disagree with, and then we show the pathway on what was going to be designed in terms of technology. That's our business, so we have all the possible mobility. So we have some tools, technological tools, which allow us to work from anywhere in the world, so that favored all these. And what we achieved was space, a very modern space. So today, after 3 months, after the satisfaction study, they say that they're pretty satisfied, except for the policy of not having allocated spaces. That's what people have had the most difficulty with. It's difficult for them to get there and look for a place where to sit. And due to corporate policy and new guidelines from our matrix company, it's something we're supporting so they can get used to that. And this is an issue which gives a lot to talk about, and this would certainly need another intervention. Just to close, the only thing I want to say is to insist in the management space issue where we have an opportunity. We cannot just let go. We cannot have a strategic position. We need to make a difference and work with the company to provide employees the environments the company needs so that objectives could be met and reached. It's not easy, but we have a lot of tools with which we could rely on, and if we're responsible in the way we make those decisions, very likely we're going to make all those reasons, productivity, commitment, having the articulation of people from different generations to work in the same line. That's going to have positive implications in the company and on people who work. Thank you.